The chairman of the House committee investigating the riot now says he has evidence that members of Congress were in contact with the rioters.
Politico describes it as a, quote, trove of documents to the investigation.
The committee revealed several text messages that Hannity sent to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and others.
The January 6th committee now says it wants to speak with former Vice President Mike Pence.
Hey everyone, Happy New Year and welcome back to The Breakdown. This week we have a very special edition of The Breakdown where we're going to be getting into the weeds and breaking down the January 6th committee. And to help us break it down, we have Politico's own Kyle Cheney, the senior legal affairs reporter. I want to start with a bit of a political anatomy of the committee. Looking back on how this committee was formed and this unfortunate lack of bipartisanship, what the important moments were in its formation and how it's affected the committee's work.
The committee was never supposed to exist in its current form. The initial idea was a 9/11 style commission to review in great detail what happened. It would be unfathomable not to have some kind of fulsome investigation of how something of this magnitude could happen inside the Capitol, violently threatening Congress and the Vice President of the United States. And the further you got away from January 6th, the more I think everyone kind of retreated into their foxholes of their party. And Republicans in particular began, after initially breaking from Trump, kind of rallied around him. With the absence of other options, Pelosi turned to a select committee, which is completely within her power to do. We have a select committee with 7 Democrats and 2 Republican Trump opponents who were appointed by Speaker Pelosi to sit on the committee. So yes, as you pointed out, bipartisanship, but a different kind of bipartisanship than we're used to.
Was there a moment that you would point to as the moment that Trump was on his way to reestablishing that kind of control?
The one that jumps out to me, and the one that I think I hear committee members, Democrats and Republicans on the January 6th committee point to, is actually McCarthy himself going to meet with Trump at Mar-a-Lago a couple of weeks after the attack. I think Republicans realized that the Trump base is still just maybe the most potent faction within the party, and they weren't about to abandon him after January 6th.
Explain to us how the Republicans who are on this committee, who they are and how they ended up on the committee.
Liz Cheney is the vice chair of the panel. She had become maybe the loudest voice within the Republican conference opposing Donald Trump's effort to overturn the election after November 3rd.
As his supporters were invading the Capitol of the United States, is clearly unfit for future office.
And the other Republican is Adam Kinzinger, who essentially played a very similar role, is not as prominent a name as Liz Cheney, but was, at least rhetorically on the same page as her. So they had found themselves kind of ostracized from the main Republican conference already.
I remember from covering the 9/11 Commission, the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission, they argued that the productive relationship they had is why they were successful in researching, investigating, and writing the definitive history of 9/11. What is the relationship between Cheney and Thompson like?
Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney have seemed to have an extremely productive relationship. In fact, the whole committee is fairly tight, and it helps when you don't have a hostile minority you don't really see on the Hill very often, but Thompson and Cheney are the reason for that.
We're in the process of interviewing witnesses, taking depositions, and clearly we have uncovered some things that cause us real concern.
What has the committee accomplished in the last year?
This committee was built from scratch, and within a matter of a couple of months had a massive team of investigators. They're enormously expansive. They're putting out hundreds and hundreds of interview requests. They're piecing together a lot of hidden aspects of what led to January 6th, the effort by Trump to use the Justice Department to overturn the election, what was happening inside the White House, and aspects of the money trail that went behind the rally.
Could you take us through some of the highlights of what they have been public about?
In a committee where you don't have an opposition party, essentially, it makes it much easier to run the investigation you want. And I think that has made it possible for them to very strategically decide what comes out and when.
There have been a few legal battles so far. Give us an overview of where those stand right now.
The most important legal battle for the committee, it's already reached the Supreme Court. It's Trump v. Thompson. Trump has sued the January 6th committee and the National Archives to shield his White House records from the investigation. That was one of the first things the committee did, was we want all of Donald Trump's White House records related to January 6th to overturn the election. So it's a massive request from the archives, but when they say is essential to understanding Trump's mindset, and that could be the whole ball game. The committee essentially knows it's time limited till the end of this year, because if Republicans take the House, as they're likely to do, the committee's done. And if Trump can delay long enough, that the outcome of the case doesn't matter. So what's happening now is the committee is pleading with the Supreme Court to say, look, if you're going to take this up, do it on an expedited schedule. But the question's all about the timeline.
What are the big things we should be watching for in the short, medium, and long term here?
I think we'll see things like a hearing on the pressure put on state election officials. I think we could see people like Secretary Raffensperger from Georgia talk about the pressure he was under from Donald Trump and others to sort of find the extra votes to help reverse the outcome there.
I want to ask you what you think the legacy of the January 6th committee will be. And is one of the things that are driving the members of this committee a sense of they have to make sure that Donald Trump is no longer a threat to the republic?
This election wasn't that close, and you still had this situation unfold that led to violence at the Capitol. Imagine if you had a really close election with a genuinely contested outcome. It's kind of a scary thought that the system barely withstood what was essentially not a real case of fraud or irregularities. If people can really crystallize the danger of what happened and why it's not just limited to what happened in 2020, but could be a danger in future elections, I think that's what the committee wants the public to understand, why it's not just something that happened in the past that we don't need to relitigate, but it's something that's very much a present danger to the republic.